It's difficult dealing with a tragedy or a difficulty in life. But can you understand why Willimon would have had some difficulty in answering the question? There was some difficulty because there was no background for him to address it from the Christian faith, because they hadn't really made a commitment to the Christian faith. So bringing up all of that would have been like training on the spot, and that's difficult to bring up all the reasons why the church could kind of answer this question for her. He would have to kind of go from square one, so she just didn't seem to understand his answers. You understand how difficult that can be for a pastor to answer that question when one hasn't had any grounding in knowing what the language even is of the church. So Willimon continues his story. Later, some of the church members came over and tried to help her out, and they hardly knew her. The coming days were hard for her, particularly hard, he thought, because she didn't have enough oil in her lamp, you might say. I wanted to be there, he said. I wanted to be there, sitting there on the sofa to give her some oil. I wanted to speak her way into the Christian faith and try to help her. I tried, but it didn't seem to make a connection. In the end, I failed somehow. She didn't seem to understand what I was speaking of, about how to get through this in a Christian way. Some of us will think, Lord, I hope that never happens to me. A situation like that. Or how will I deal with such a situation like that? I hope that for you and for me, it doesn't happen. We don't ever have to face such a situation. But many of you are here this morning because you're preparing or you're dealing with such a situation in your life. You are here in what Willimon calls tragedy preparation class. That's what the church sometimes offers, is tragedy preparation classes. It's one of the good things about being involved and active in your discipleship and then deepening your discipleship and being involved in a church that's seeking to help equip you to be a disciple and following in the way. If you've ever wondered about the value of going to church, perhaps tragedy preparation isn't a bad reason for why people show up to church, kind of dealing with whatever circumstance life may offer. It's one of the valuable things that a church can help us with, is tragedy preparation. But it's difficult. It's difficult no matter how deep our discipleship might be. It's also very difficult, in fairness to those wise maidens, to give somebody else your faith. You can't necessarily give someone else your faith. Your faith tends to be your faith. You can't even drum it into them. You can't shout it into somebody how to have faith in the Christian life. You can tell them what your relationship with Christ is like. You can testify to your own experience with Christ, but you can't give it away. You can't pour it into them. They have to, in some order, go in search of it for themselves. They have to receive it and receive Christ in their own way, rather than as you understand Christ, how would they have a relationship with Christ? There's a limit to how much we can share. So the wise maidens are practicing what I learned in community organizing, which was the iron rule: never do for others what they can do for themselves. Sounds a little hard, but never do for others what they could and should do for themselves. It seems hard, but it's really just giving them their power, their ability to act. We always need to give people their power and their ability to act. Never take away another person's power. It's a simple practice of leadership development and equipping people to be their best selves. Never do for others what they should be able to do for themselves. In his novel, William Gibson writes in the novel A Mass for the Dead, he wrote about the day he was tidying up his parents' home after his mother had died, and so it was time for him to kind of clean out things because it was no longer the family home. And he picked up his mother's reading glasses and he put them on. And he began to read her favorite Bible that was next to the chair that she would always sit in. He sat there in that comfy chair at the window, and he had those glasses of hers on. Probably weren't the right prescription for him. But he had those on because he was wanting somehow to recapture what she understood about Scripture, what she saw. Maybe if I put on her glasses, I'll catch a glimpse of what she understood about her faith. He reached out for some slender thread of her faith, once so alive and so vibrant in her, that he wanted to be a part of his life in that moment. But it didn't work. He couldn't put on the glasses in order to receive the faith that his mother had. Perhaps he was too preoccupied with emptying the house. Perhaps he was dealing with his own grief or with just trying to figure it all out. But he could not recapture anything by just using her glasses to read her Bible. He said it felt silly, could have looked silly to be wearing his mother's glasses like that. His mother's faith, in the end, couldn't be borrowed, couldn't be put on that way. Another's faith can be a starter for our faith, but it can't be necessarily our faith. It's a fragile thing. We can admire another's faith, we can envy it, but we can never possess it as it was for them. It needs to become our own. They can't pour it into us. We have to somehow have the ability to deepen that faith on our own. Others' faith can be a good example, can be a model for us. But each of us must walk that lonesome road, that journey of faith on our own. It isn't faith until it's your faith. We often wonder, what's the good of gathering as church? Why do people do this on a regular basis every Sunday? I mean, do you really need to do this 52 times a year? Well, maybe 52 times a year. What's the point of gathering as a church? What would make it attractive? More and more in today's culture, it's less and less attractive for people to be involved in organized religion, no matter what that religion is. Less and less people are looking to be involved in such communities. Might we offer community, though? What if we truly offered and made a difference by offering community in all its deepest forms? That might be enough. Perhaps coming alongside others, giving a bit of oil away, sharing our faith, maybe at least giving an example of what faithful living can look like, even in the most tragic of circumstances. That could be a model for others, and at least being in solidarity with and coming alongside and sitting with them in the difficult circumstances of their lives. Never let someone feel isolated and alone in the midst of their experience of life. A community that celebrates together, that slows down to prepare together, that waits together, that has some way of dealing with the delayed gratification of what is to come. That would be worth waiting for, even when waiting is the hardest part of life. We can't change the reality, we can't change the experience, but waiting together, Christian solidarity, acting together as a community and a fellowship. Why, I think that's being prepared. Are we prepared? Are we offering that to our community? And what's the preparation for, ultimately, right? What's the preparation for? Well, the story tells us something about that, too. All this preparation was for a joyous celebration, a wedding banquet. That's what was being prepared for, to be a part of that wedding banquet. If you've ever been to a good wedding experience, you know exactly what that feels like. The exuberance, the exaltation of being a part of a joyous event like a wedding that just makes sense, and the celebration of a couple coming together. It's a joy. It's all preparation for a party, right? That's what's being offered to us in the Christian faith as well. We are offered to join the kingdom party, the gift of God's love and grace for all. We do not live our lives cringing in fear and waiting in terror. That's not what we're waiting for. We're waiting for a moment of joy, a moment of celebration, a moment that is worth partying about. Preacher David Buttrick calls it a joyous hullabaloo. That's not my language. I don't use hullabaloo, but he does. He says that's what we're working towards. A joyous hullabaloo is what we're expecting in the end. It's a party that we don't want to miss. Christ is coming into our lives. The realm of God is at hand, Jesus said often. And the story that he shares shares something about being prepared, being faithful, being alert for the day, waiting, even though it can be the hardest part. Sometimes it's worth waiting for and living for. May we join in that journey of faith together and find ways to live into that joy that is offered to us in the name of Christ. So be it, and may it be so.